Audiolibros en inglés. Cuentos clásicos, leídos en inglés. Rapunzel, by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there were a man and a woman who had long wished in vain for a child. After many years, the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house, from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day, the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion bellflowers, known in the area as Rapunzels. It looked so fresh and green that she longed for it. After some time of pining away, the woman began to look pale and miserable. Her husband became alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some of the rampion in the garden behind our house, I will die." The man, who loved her, thought, "Sooner than let my wife die, I will bring her some of the rampion myself, let it cost what it will." At twilight, he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so amazingly good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must at once more descend into the garden. Therefore, in the gloom of evening, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," she said angrily, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Wait," he answered. "Please let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not eaten some." The enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case is as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. There is only one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. She will be well treated, and I will care for her like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything. Months later, when the woman began childbirth, the enchantress appeared at once. After the baby was born, the enchantress gave the child the name of Rapunzel and took the baby away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower deep in the forest. The tower had neither stairs nor a door, but all the way at the top there was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she would stand beneath the window and cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down for me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold. When she would hear the voice of the enchantress, she would unfasten her braided tresses, wind them round one of the hooks of the window above, and let her hair fall 70 feet down. The enchantress would climb up the hair into the tower. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. There he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time by letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and looked for the door of the tower, but there was none to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. One day, when he was standing behind a tree, he saw the enchantress get there and heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down for me." Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," he said. The next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down for me." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man, such as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it would not let him rest until he had seen her. With his words, Rapunzel lost her fear. When he asked her if she would take him for her husband, she saw that he was young and handsome, and thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does," and she said yes. She laid her hand in his and said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it. When that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he would come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. For many days the enchantress did not realize this was happening, until one day Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how come you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son? He is with me in a moment." "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the enchantress. "What do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, and seized a pair of scissors with the right. Then, snip snap, she cut them off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert, where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window. When the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down for me," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird no longer sits singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, with nothing to eat but roots and berries, and did not but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel lived in wretchedness, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl. Far away he heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. When he approached, Rapunzel knew him and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her and his children to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived happily ever after. The end.